Okay, let's go ahead and get started talking about percentages and percent. And first off, I'm going to go ahead and give you guys the standard definition for percent. And if we take a look at just the word percent, percent literally means parts of 100. A percentage is, or a percent is basically, it's a specialized ratio with 100 as the denominator. So basically what we're doing is we're just giving ourselves some sort of measure of, how many out of 100 would be the type of thing that you're looking for. In a lot of ways, we can also think of this as a percentage is going to be another proportion, and we'll usually see this parts over our whole. But here we're going to basically artificially set, or artificially sort of manipulate it so our base is going to be equal to 100. So whatever portion divided by whatever our whole is, this is going to end up being our percent. A couple things to note here is a percent is going to look a lot like any other decimal number. So we need to include the percent sign when the number is a percent. So this is something that we have to be very careful of. If we don't include that percent sign on there, it's just another decimal. Let's go ahead and go ahead and show you some of what this is going to look like. So if I say something like 42%, all this really means is I've got 42 out of 100. If I had something like 60%, that would just be 60 out of 100. Or say something like 7%, and that's just 7 out of 100. So it's pretty easy to see how this actually works out. What that percentage basically means is you've got some sort of, ratio. Now what we're going to do is let's talk about converting between our different types of numbers to and from percent. So the first and the easiest is going back and forth between percents and decimals. So we're going to go from percent to and from decimals. And the nice thing with this is that we're going to discover that because that percent is just basically something divided by 100, all we're going to end up doing is using our powers of 10. So when we convert our percents to decimals, all we're going to end up doing is we're going to end up moving the decimal place. And furthermore, because that decimal place is going to be that power of 10, and it's always going to be 100 as percent, we're always going to move our decimal 2 places. No more, no less. So say we have something like, say I've got something like 35.2%. Well, think about this. That's going to be 35.2 over 100. Well, what happens when I divide by 100? I move my decimal 2 places to the left. That would be 0.352, just like that. You'll notice I have my calculator out here. You can in fact just go ahead and divide by 100, but it's just as easy just to move your decimal place. Okay, what happens if I go in the other direction? Or actually, let's do some more examples, because these are easy. These are easier than falling off a log. You should not get bruises doing this. So we've got something like 48%. Okay, all I'm going to do is divide by 100. That just moves that decimal 2 spots. So that's going to be 0.48. Oh, what happens if I've got 4.8%? Again, we're going to move that decimal 2 places. Notice that that's going to be 0.048. We've moved that decimal 2 spots. 1, 2. It's really tempting to just make that, to just give myself 2 place values here, but you'd be engaging in what I call wishful mathematics. Oh, how about I do like 480%? Oh my gosh. Well, again, moving that decimal, that would just be 4.80. Yeah, really easy. Decimals to percent, all we're doing is moving things in the other direction. Decimal to percent, that means that the decimal point moves to the right. So, say I've got something like 0.27. That's going to be, well, what would this be in hundredths? That would be 27 hundredths or 27%. And these things are equal. They represent the same value. There's nothing different between these except the form. Okay, let's keep going. What happens if I do something like 0.5? Still have to move that decimal 2 places. That would move, oops, red. 1, 2, that would make this 50%. Just like that. Or what happens if I've got something like 0.06? Well, this would be 6%. So all we're doing is moving that decimal place 2 places, no more, no less. Alrighty. Let's talk about our other type of numbers, which happens to be fractions. Let's talk about converting fractions, or yes, fractions to and from decimals, or not from decimals, from percents. And what we're going to discover here is that we can, converting fractions to and from percent, we can basically write our percent over 100. And then basically reduce. So if I've got something like, say it's something like, I don't know, 21%. Well, this would just be 21 over 100. I'd be done right there. I can't reduce this. Recall that we can only reduce by factors of 2 or 5. Okay. What happens if I do something like this? Well, 4.5%. That's going to look a little different. That's going to be 4.5 over 100. Ooh, that's a little ugly. So what we're going to do is, in order to convert this to something that is an actual fraction, we need to not have that decimal right there. I'm going to go ahead and multiply this by 10 over 10. So I can move that decimal one spot. That's going to be 45 over 1,000. And now I can reduce both the top and bottom by a factor of 5. So when I reduce this, 45 divided by 5 is 9. 1,000 divided by 5 is 200. So this is going to turn into 9/200ths. In a lot of ways, this is how we go from percent to a fraction. Now, we've got two options when we're going from fraction to percent. So, fraction to a percent, let's talk about option 1. And that is, if we can, write an equivalent fraction with 100 as the denominator. So, say I had something like 3/10. Oh, 3/10. I could just take this and multiply that by, say, 10 over 10. This would become 30/100ths. And guess what? Now I've got 30 parts of 100. This would just be 30%. Let's do that again. Let's say we've got something like 6/25ths. Well, in order to convert this to hundredths, I could multiply that by, say, 4 over 4. That would turn into 6 times 4 is going to be 24 over 100. This would be 24%, 24 parts of 100, just like that. Option 2 is almost easier. We're just going to convert the fraction to a decimal, and then move the decimal point. So, say I've got something like 3/8, and 3/8 is going to be equal to, and if you don't happen to remember off the top of your head what 3/8 is, just do 3 divided by 8. That's 0.375 or 375 thousandths. 0.375. I would move that decimal point 2 spots over. It would be 37.5%. If I have something like, I don't know, 5/9. 5/9 is a little funny because this is a repeating decimal. So this is actually 0.5 bar. And doing this, I could think of this as, 0.5555 and so on. Usually we're only going to want one place past this, so I'll say go out 4 decimal places and let's round. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to say this is about equal to, say, 55.6%. This is, in fact, an estimate. If I wanted to be more accurate, this would be 55 and 55.5 bar%. But we always want that whole number, and usually, for most of what we're going to do, we only want one place past that decimal. I will say, read your instructions here. But notice that in order to get just 1/10 of 1%, we needed our 10,000ths place. So you need 4 decimal places. Alrighty, hopefully that makes sense. And if you have any questions, shoot me a message. And I'll see you in the next video.